Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to The Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnik, your host. We're now in our 14th season, and it's a joy today to have Lynette Bell with us. She's the president of the Truist Foundation. With over 30 years of experience in purpose-based philanthropy and financial services, she has been a formidable force in breaking down barriers to equity and creating thriving communities. She has spearheaded initiatives that fund nonprofits and CDFIs with innovative solutions, and she views each grant as a partnership to co-create change. We love that. Lynette's expertise spans small business entrepreneurship, building career pathways for economic mobility, and advancing philanthropy in the often overlooked rural South, a place where I actually went to college. Under her leadership, the Truist Foundation has committed significant resources, including a $22 million investment in just 2023, to drive this kind of meaningful impact. So join us now as we delve into Lynette's career, her insights, and ways of leading a purpose-driven life and career, and her vision for the future of corporate philanthropy. Lynette, welcome.
Thank you so much, Toby. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm curious to see what school you went to in the South.
I went to Hampton-Sydney College in South Central Virginia, a little bit north of you. I think you're in Charlotte today.
Yes, I'm in Charlotte today.
And beautiful farmland Farmville is the closest town, but it's still a very small liberal arts college. But I actually very much liked my experience there, and it was rural.
Yeah, beautiful side of the country for sure.
Yeah. So Lynette, we usually start out by asking our guests to give us maybe a 2 to 4 minute intro of their life story, kind of where you came from, how you found your way, mentors, bumps along the way, whatever is part of your narrative.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, a great opportunity to speak with you. As Toby said, I'm Lynette Bell, president of the Truist Foundation. Truist Financial Corp is the 7th largest financial institution in the U.S., and we are the philanthropic arm of the bank, making sure that we're living up to our purpose, mission, and value here at Truist. And we're a purpose-driven financial institution, which is to inspire and build better lives and community. So I've been in banking, as stated, over 30 years. I've done a number of jobs. I think I've done almost every job at the bank, but make a loan, which is odd, being at a bank. But I've had some great opportunities along the way to do unique things in the company to help, drive along our growth, resilience, and our purpose in our communities. And so when you think about mentors along the way, I've had so many mentors that gave me some great advice. And one of the pieces of advice that I like to give younger adults as they ask me to mentor them now is, everybody's coming to work with bringing their best opportunities forward, and putting your head down and doing the work. That's key. It's important, but really you have to build relationships. And so no one knows how brilliant or great you are when you just come in every day with head down doing the job. It's about going the extra mile to form that relationship with someone who does not look like you, who may be outside of your work purview based on what are you doing in a company, but building relationships and getting to know kind of the culture and movement of the firm is so critical for advancement. And so I tell people that is a part of the extra work that has to be done if you really want to advance in a company, is to get to understand the culture, but also build relationships with people who you would never think about asking for coffee or lunch, so that you can continue to advance in the firm if that's your desire. Mm-hmm. So that's been part of my success on this.
I'm smiling because next week on June 5th, I'm launching my new book that I've co-authored with my friend Samir Kanuga, and it's called Connecting the Dots, Building Your Network and Your Legacy, because it's that very point, right?
Yeah.
And I find in life, and you seem to be an exemplar of this, that it's never too early to contemplate what your purpose is or what your special qualities are in life, even if you don't have the answers. But my belief and philosophy with the book is that if you think that question through, you're going to be further along in both welcoming whatever the incoming the universe sends to you and finding the good in it, but also you're going to be more effective and efficient in going out into the universe, whether it's through LinkedIn or the jobs you apply for, to get with like-minded people who will help you advance that purpose or that mission. So I'm smiling because you're right. Don't just keep your head down, right?
Yeah.
Get out.
Well, I'm going to get that book because I love reading things that continue to advance and change my mindset. So I'm excited to see it.
Great. I'd love to maybe even come down and do a book event with you and your team. Can you tell me a little bit about like take us back, like did you grow up in the Carolinas or did you find?
No, actually, I'm from Florida. I'm a Florida kid. I grew up in Florida. I went to school in Florida. So myself, I have three brothers. My dad was like, "You can go to college, but you're not leaving the state because I'm not paying out of state tuition." So I went to Florida State. And my other brother went to University of Florida. If you know anything about rivalries with football, and then my other brother went to Florida A&M University, historically Black college and university. So yeah, we have fun times around sporting events and holiday because the boys are very much into their teams. So yeah, so I grew up in Florida and had the opportunity to, advance my education. And my dad, who did not get that opportunity, coming from Georgia to Florida at an early age when his dad passed away at the age of 16 to live with an uncle, did not get a chance to go to college. And so he was adamant that we go, but we could not leave the state of Florida. So I'm a Florida kid, but I've lived in a few cities around the Southeast, but now landed in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And was it your major in college that brought you into the world of banking, or was it?
Yeah, I was a finance major. I started out an accounting major and then I got to cost and tax and I was like, this is taking my GPA down. So I'm out of here. So I switched to finance right away.
And then a recruiter found you, or how long?
No, actually, I graduated. I did not have a job. My dad's like, I'm not paying for an apartment in Tallahassee. I guess you're coming home. And so I grew up in Vero Beach, Florida, on the southeastern seaboard, a little small, quaint town. And what was in the town from an industry perspective, and so place-based matters, right? So in that particular small town were citrus processing plants, which are now gone, and banks and accounting firms. And so I ended up working at the bank because I had to have a job. So yeah, I went back home and started working in banking.
And what was that expression you just like? You said space, place, and
Oh, I said place-based matters, because when you go to select cities, as you select a city, once you graduate, like I'm going to go to New York, or I'm going to go to Atlanta, I'm going to go to San Francisco, where you land up matters because it tells you how successful and thriving a community or city is, right? Based on the types of private industries that are brought into those particular cities. So growing up in a small quaint town in Florida, the private industry council was not big on bringing industry in. They were very much wanted to keep it small and quaint. And so going back home, I was like, I really didn't want to go back home, but I had no choice because I was not going to live in my car. So I went home, and those were the only industries that were there that were prevalent. So yeah.
I do a lot of career coaching, and I always remind people that, there's certain industries, for example, I'm in New York, so, finance, entertainment, nonprofits, it's just certain industries that lend themselves to certain areas.
Exactly.
Is a really helpful question to ask people when they're thinking about career, because they've got to kind of figure out where there's practical opportunities, right? You're not going to put manufacturing for the most part into Manhattan because it's just not what it once was. So
yeah.
So banking worked out for you.
It did. I've been here for 30 plus years.
Wow. And why? Obviously the culture matters, but what all kept you there?
Having the opportunity, i.e., to put my head down again, a lesson learned very early, putting your head down does not advance you in a company, but having the opportunity, once I realized that I need to form relationships and build my network, it gave me the opportunity to kind of jump around a little bit in the firm and help co-create new ideas or concepts to kind of advance the work of the company. And so what kept me here was that, and then the fact that it was in the South, being a Southern girl, I really don't like the cold. And so I was in Atlanta for a number of years. And so if you know anything about the South, when there's winter storms, snow or ice, we lose our mind and the cripples the city. And so I was not really going further north. I just like the South because I love weather that is warmer climate. So that was one reason I stayed in the South. But I think for the company to be at the same firm for so long, just to see the continued growth and development of the company. And again, we acquired and merged with a lot of firms, and I worked on every single merger of this bank. This last one that we finalized in 2019 was probably the hardest one, but I worked on every single merger. I've been on every merger team that we've had. So as you kind of continue to dilute the culture of the firm by bringing in other firms and companies, it just helps to make it a better company. And so I stayed because I wanted to see that kind of fruition.
Yeah, because I've worked on plenty of M&A deals in my career, and wow, the culture makes it or breaks it, right?
It does.
It's an art. It's not a science. So some fail and some don't. Can you tell me a little bit then about the foundation work? How long have you been at the foundation?
So I was working on the merger in a different role at the firm. And when the merger closed, the foundation, which I had worked with indirectly. So the merger closed in December 2019. And when we merged, and I moved our headquarters city from Atlanta, Georgia to Charlotte, North Carolina, the head of the foundation at the time was like, I'm not moving. And so at that time, all corporate jobs led to Charlotte. And so I got the opportunity, I got tapped on the shoulder to have this opportunity to lead the foundation, which I was so excited about. Our foundation before the merger has been in existence for over 15 years. It started out in 2008. And so to get it at this point in time at the merger, when we were changing our banner outside and painting our colors purple across our communities, they were like, reinvent or recreate what we've been doing. And so it was an opportunity for me to look at how do we really lean in a way that gives us the ability to differentiate how we do grant making. And so we really use an evidence-based solution process to help identify where's the right white space for Truist as we created this new brand for a financial institution. And so work with a consulting firm. In the early 2020, we're like, we got our strategy, we're going to move forward. And then COVID happened.
Oh,
And
gosh.
so what happened with COVID was it kind of blew up everything we were working on. And really, we had to have a rapid response from the foundation because the firm wanted to, again, take care of our community because that was our culture, is that make sure we take care and invest in our community. And we were hearing from some of our large nonprofit partners that, wow, people are struggling, communities are really bleeding, and people are sick and cannot go back to work. And so opportunities to support them so they don't lose their homes and their families don't go into financial distress. We formed a rapid response team, ignoring what we thought strategically we could work on to do basic care, basic needs. The first 90 days of the pandemic, we deployed $25 million. I had a rapid response team. We were taking applications in daily. And in every 4 days, we were making decisions of pushing money back out the door within another 5 days. So we had a well-oiled engine that we were trying to deploy that first 25 really quickly. And we got it out the door within about 75 days.
Wow, bravo. So nimble is what I take from that. Separate from COVID, if we can think that way, what is the overall philosophy of the foundation and how does it work? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about sort of the equity approach, how you're addressing equity.
Yeah, at the foundation, we really wanted to kind of prioritize our grant making and really get strategically focused on it. So part of the work we were doing to figure out where's the right white space to differentiate ourselves, we came up with basically 2 strategic pillars and 1 kind of silent pillar for us. Was the first one was that the evidence was showing us that in the pandemic, small businesses were not resilient. They couldn't recalibrate. In a B2B business, they could not revamp their model so that they had survival. And so we realized that small businesses were the fabric of this country. And so strengthening small businesses became our pillar. Everything that's related in the ecosystem to provide equity, really prioritizing underserved and underrepresented communities specifically on how we support those diverse business owners through nonprofits that were doing that work. That was really critical. The second pillar for the foundation, as we talk about building equity into our platform for grant making, was how do we help individuals upskill and reskill for a new high demand job? And so building career pathways to economic mobility really focuses on those adult learners. And it sounds like workforce development because it is, but it also is about job placement. So it's just not about the technical assistance they need and oh, that, hey, thanks for playing, here's your certificate, but really looking at those nonprofits that have been doing this work for a long time, helping people revamp themselves when a job has become obsolete and move them into that new space by providing the support, but also job placement and the wraparound kind of technical supportive services they'll need post going into a new field. Right. And so we got rid of kind of supporting K through 12 through our foundation because we have other venues in the bank that supports that age group, but we really wanted to lean in and have an impact that was more concentrated. So we really started focusing on adult learning. So those are our strategic pillars. And the silent one, again, when you talk about geographical placement, there are things that are going to happen in Miami, Florida that are different from what happens in Baltimore, Maryland. And so we allocated a small portion of a pillar that says, when things happen that are unique for your communities, we call it the thriving community pillar, you can still address those unique opportunities without the restrictions. The only requirement we have is that the nonprofit has to serve low to moderate income people. So those were kind of the areas that we focused on that we wanted to be very intentional about. And so I would say intentionality was our theme when we started doing this and creating a learning agenda for our foundation.
So can you say a little bit about maybe an example or two of where it could be an individual, it could be one of the nonprofits you worked with about so the look of success?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found very critical as we were looking at some of the evidence, Toby, was that particularly under the career pathway one, is that a lot of our southeastern cities, urban versus rural, had the highest levels of poverty and unemployment. And so we took the strategic pillars that we talked about, where we want to see a shift in some of economic systems and some of the barriers that existed. And so we started working with 3 national nonprofits on an initiative called Where It Starts. So we thought, what does change start? And again, it's not us swooping down going, okay, we got the idea and concept, but we looked at 3 national nonprofits who kind of bubbled to the top for this initiative called Where It Starts and committed $22 million to investing in it. The beauty of that was we brought in the private sector funding, but those nonprofits have the capacity and the ability to scale. And so they work with boots on the ground as well as bringing in the public sector and so for the Where It Starts initiative, it actually is being done because what we identified in some of our evidence-based approach was the demographic and economic threads for those communities that were struggling, that needed to shift some of those barriers. So it was Miami, it was Charlotte, Atlanta, Nashville, and Memphis. Every single mayor in those cities committed to supporting this initiative to address and eradicate changing the wealth trajectory for people who have been left out of the system. And so they came aboard with dollars that they get federally or statewide to support some of the work about helping people advance their career. And so the unique thing about this was that this was a co-created solution with Living Cities, Main Street America, and CALE. And these are national nonprofits that were part of this process that we created, and they're part of this multi-year commitment that we've done.
It reminds me a little bit of what Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan have done with Detroit and trying to collaborate there with the foundation world, Ford and others. So Where It Starts, what is it? Is it funds, microloans? Is it?
Yeah, so it's an initiative that we started, a co-created solution that, again, brought the evidence forward that says, how do we help build better lives and communities in these 5 cities that have the same type of economic threads around, disinvestment and poverty and high unemployment. And so CALE is a national nonprofit that helps improve education, right, for adult learners. They're using about $15.7 million of the grant to operate a program that will help jumpstart careers. This is part of that career pathways into specific sectors of industry. So the financial services industry, as an example, is one that they're leaning in, empowering and equipping individuals with the resources they need to transition from education into a career. We talked to Living Cities, and they're very, very collaborative across the country. They're based in New York, quite frankly, and they are working to close the racial income and wealth gap across the country. And then in Main Street America was doing similar things. And so the synergy of bringing these nonprofits, who, by the way, had never worked together, had not even met each other. The fact that we brought them together saying, here's what the data is showing us. We know that you are doing this individually, right? And making a difference, but how about if we come together to co-create a solution and really address it and see, does it drive the impact we want to see? And so for us, it hits both of our strategic pillars of building career pathways and strengthening small businesses, because we know Living Cities and Main Street have worked with programs in the past at helping to uplift entrepreneurs, particularly of color, and increasing access to capital and providing them with the resources they need to overcome any inequities or disruptions to the economy that might throw off their business cycle. Absolutely. So we're just really excited that we were able to bring them together, and they are working together in a way that is making a difference in those communities.
Very cool. Ladies and gentlemen, again today on The Caring Economy, we're thrilled to have Lynette Bell with us. She's the president of the Truist Foundation. Lynette, we're just talking about cities for the most part. What about the rural aspect of it? How's that playing out in your philanthropy?
Yeah, so the good news is that we have, as part of our process, I have a small team here, small but dynamic team, but we could not do kind of this supportive service in a geographical based way without the support of other teammates in the company. So we really utilize and place dollars from the foundation across the enterprise of the Truist footprint. And so in major markets across the Southeast and Northeast, Midwest, and into Texas, again, because we're kind of scattered across the US, we provide dollars that, one, address all of the microcosms that exist in a city, right? From the urban to the rural. And so things that exist in the rural area, like in similar vein, like small businesses need support, but it may not need it on the same scale that a Memphis, Miami, and Nashville does. But we provide those geographical based kind of investment dollars to have that regional based investment happening across those smaller, more tight communities.
This might not be your bailiwick, but I think about high speed internet access, particularly with rural areas. It's a big campaign issue for a lot of political things. Does that factor in at all to what you do? I mean, it obviously affects people's opportunities, economic opportunities, but from a funding perspective, you probably, I would think, leave that to others to lead, or?
No, I would say that one of the things that happened during COVID is that, wow, we realized not only were nonprofits disconnected, like they didn't have the cloud and services that would transition in a disruptive time like that, but small businesses didn't either. And so what we identified through another nonprofit that we were working with called Connect Humanity, we actually funded this initiative because when you look across the US, right, particularly in rural communities, they are the most disconnected, similar to the 1940s Electricity Act that was happening. Like the US was half of the US was still in darkness. And so the broadband disconnection, so because to your point, you can't help people get a career pathway to change their wealth trajectory if they don't have access to broadband. And so we realized this is part of the infrastructure or the base layer that has to happen in communities. And so we made a significant investment early on in Connect Humanity to support broadband access, particularly in rural America. And again, you can imagine the South and Southeast are probably the hardest hit when you look at a heat map of where disconnection happens. Yeah. But this organization is helping to do that. And I know we had BEAD funding coming from the federal government that went to a lot of our large providers of broadband, right? Not to those communities that were unique and minor, and very rural. And so they're working with the state and county officials to make sure those connectivities happen using a process to help build broadband in areas where it's still very desolate.
Good. I mean, we need it more than ever. And I do think it's a collaborative effort. We can't just look at tech companies or telecommunications companies to do it. But it's become very obvious to me how much of a differentiator it is. If you don't have access to the internet in a guaranteed way, then you really are, your wings are clipped. Can you say a little bit about, in your career, the trends you're seeing in philanthropy now? Is it, for example, I've seen of late, there are more foundations considering giving money to organizations to do what they need to do and not micromanage how they apply it. Are you seeing more impact investing or any sort of meta themes you're seeing in philanthropy?
Yeah. I would say that, I'd like to remind people that real transformative action starts at the community level. And nonprofit leaders know their communities so much better than, we do in a private sector funder role. But I will say that corporate philanthropy does connect and engage with those local levels. And so one statistics that just continues to be surprising, you talk about Meta, between $20 and $26 billion has gone out annually to nonprofits. That said, the impact has the potential to be a real huge differentiator. However, oftentimes the industry of philanthropy continues to be challenged by, backlogging nonprofits to get the right reporting in and, lacking real strategy to ensure valuable impact. So at Truist, we really established, I will say, a robust grant-making approach that allows us to keep having that deep look at where our dollars are going and how impact is really penetrating to the best result. And again, we stay connected with our nonprofits. And I think one of the things and trends that I am seeing is that funders are providing more clarity and transparency, but also shifting kind of the trust needle a little bit. And it's not that, they didn't trust them, but there's a lot happening in trust-based philanthropy now that I'm seeing across many factions across different industries and sectors.
That's satisfying. You know, you want to trust the people you're giving money to, and you want to let people do their jobs,
Yep.
not manage it. Can you talk a little bit about measurement and how you're sort of tracking or acknowledging that impact that you're
Yeah, so we actually, again, I said when we shifted from, and again, no shame to the way we were providing funding before this last merger happened in our communities, but it was kind of a scattered approach, right? Just based on what kind of rolled in and the needs that we saw, again, addressing basic care and basic needs, but couldn't really see a concentrated impact. So one of the things that we did shift to in the foundation once we really leaned into a very strategic focus was how do we measure and evaluate? And so as part of that process, we created what we lovingly call measured evaluation and learning. I stated early on that we created a learning agenda for the foundation. We wanted to make sure that some of the risks that we were taking, because, as funders, we should be taking those risks and investing in our communities. What are the system changes or barriers that are being eradicated from it? So as part of this process, we created the rigor around how you report back based on the size of the grant. But we meet with our grantees, particularly for our jumbo and large grants, 3 to 4 times during the course of a year to have a conversation versus always looking for the paperwork to be filled in, but having a conversation and dialogue with them on what shifts are happening, what were their expectations. Things happen where, hey, Lynette, we expected this type of diversification in our funding cycle. The federal portion of that dried up. And so that impacts a program. So if you're having continual dialogue, then you aren't surprised by changes that have to happen, and you give them the flexibility to continue to adjust and be agile to make those changes so they can continue the program. So for us, that is part of what we wanted to do when we talked about what impact are we driving and what we wanted to see was also staying deeply connected to those organizations, not just writing a check and going, thanks for playing.
Yeah.
Go have a good time. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of stars or rising stars that you're working with, leaders in these organizations that you might want to give a shout out to because they demonstrate the kinds of talent and intuition and EQ that a good leader needs?
Yeah, so I will say the big initiative that we started a year plus ago with 3 national nonprofits who had never met each other. Earl Buford at Kale gets it right away. He's a smart, intuitive leader that's been doing a lot of this work. Joe Scantlebury over at Living Cities, again, great leader. He's a lawyer by trade and now running one of the largest nonprofits across the country. They understand the dynamics of what funders have to do because they've also been in those shoes. It's surprising, a lot of executive directors have been either former bankers or lawyers. And so they kind of get the business and private sector aspect, which is actually nicely blended into the overall mission of a nonprofit. And so I think those are 2 leaders that I'm most proud to continue to work with because they not only understand the dynamics of staying local and being boots on the ground with people who've been doing the work already, not swooping in as a national partner going, I got the idea, but really bringing their resources together jointly with them to continue to advance the work.
Yeah, that's great. And I also wonder, I'm thinking about succession planning. And I think too often in the nonprofit space, having been on many boards myself, is we need to do more passing the baton. We need to let people know we're grooming them. We want you to take this over. We're only going to be here for 3, 5 years, whatever. Do you think that we're getting a large talent pool of leaders in the nonprofit space and that there's exciting things happening?
Yeah, I really do. And one of the things, again, not to keep bringing it back to what we do, but talking about having that deep penetrating relationship with the nonprofit. So at Truist, we have a leadership institute. And so it actually brings in the C-suite of a nonprofit. We bring a large number in every year to go through kind of some training and professional development to think about, what does succession look like? What does my calibration look like from my team and what my talent has? We bring them into our Tourist Leadership Institute to do, mastering leadership dynamics. And so one of the things that they learn is like, what is my leadership style and what does that look like? But what's going to be the future for my organization? So we want to make sure we still continue to provide that 360 wraparound service to it. Mm-hmm. So for us, that's one of the components we think is really critical to continue success and succession planning for those organizations. So, I'm excited to bring them in. We're excited to do this because this is part of what we do. We do it, for commercial clients as well, but we're able to layer in some of our nonprofit grantees to participate in this process.
I love that. I like the idea of teaching a man or a woman to fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're developing their leadership skills.
Exactly.
I had the good fortune of going to a Goldman Sachs institutional client conference last month. It was 400, mostly CFOs, of clients of theirs, but nonprofits. And, to your point, like you, they don't just do it for their commercial clients, right? It's people like
Yeah,
me who I'm not a formal client of theirs, but they know how the ecosystem works. And I think
yeah,
that's really, I won't say it's selfless, but it's not fully self-serving, right? So I
yeah.
salute you in that. My last question we always ask our guests is any pearls of wisdom that you've gleaned throughout your career about either leading a purpose-driven brand or purpose-driven life. You talked quite a bit at the outset, but if you want to recap or add anything in, we'd love any of your pearls of wisdom, Lynette.
Yeah. I would say that, I was at a conference and a young lady made the statement, so I kind of stole it. I just really think that philanthropy is the fuel that fuels the marketplace for ideas. Like that's what we should be doing. New ideas and concepts are coming. I love the fact that we have tried and true organizations that we can depend on and rely on. But really, I would say funders need to get outside of that circle of always funding the same organizations, right? As you're talking about really diving into ecosystems to support all of the levels of an ecosystem, it can't be the same funded organizations over and over, even though they're delivering. So it's not a negative, but there are others who are doing just as an equal task around some of the work, but in a different and more nuanced way. And so to me, I think that philanthropy has a charge to continue to help build and shore up ideas around new ideas and new concepts for this marketplace. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I would say. And then the second thing is that I keep saying, and I'll say this to myself a lot of times, we are very passionate about this work that we do. And then when it doesn't go my way, a lot of times it's like, there's a different jingle outside. It doesn't say Bell Bank, it's Truist Financial. So I tell myself that all the time when I don't get my way.
I love that. Humility, right? I'm
Yes.
also reminded when you talk about, I often talk about the word catalyst, and I think you're talking about philanthropy being that sort of catalyst.
Mhm.
Going back to your opening comments about going out in the workplace and meeting your colleagues, I like to believe that nobody's cornered the market on good ideas. So young and old, new or not new to the company, those are people who can contribute and come up with ideas that you're just never going to capture unless you go out and engage them. So I
Exactly.
very much agree with you on that.
Great.
Lynette Bell, thank you so much. Truist Foundation President, joining us today on the Caring Economy. I hope you'll come back. I've got some ideas of some things for you as well. We can talk offline, but I really appreciate your joining us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Toby. Have a great day.